Hello.
Hi, Mort. It's Lauren.
Hey, Lauren.
How are you guys doing? This is Mike Sumter.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be able to join.
I have the introduction slide up, but I'm going to give it about 9 more minutes before we start. Give people a chance to join.
Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Perkins. I'm the trade show manager for AASA. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started in about 5 minutes. But thank you for joining us. We're going to just give folks a couple more minutes to jump on the call. Thank you, and we will talk to you guys in 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the AASA National Conference on Education Exhibitor webinar. We really appreciate you joining us today and know you will get a lot of knowledge that will help you on site next week in San Diego. So I want to start off with some introductions. My name is Lauren Miller, and I am the AASA Exhibits Coordinator. Also on the phone is Catherine Perkins.
Hi, everyone. I'm the AASA Exhibits Manager.
And also joining us today, we have Mort Sherman.
Hello, everybody. Good to meet you. Look forward to seeing you next week.
He is the AASA Associate Executive Director of Leadership Services and also a former superintendent. So we're super excited to have him here today to give that superintendent perspective of NCE. So we can jump right in. Here I have an update on registration numbers for you all. As of January 28th, we have over 2,000 paid registrations. This is a 21% increase over paid registrations at the same weeks out last year at NCE 2019. 58% of those registrations are superintendents. As of January 24th, we have 208 confirmed exhibitors. This is 9 more booths over the same time last year at NCE 19, and we are 7,100 square feet ahead of NCE 19. And 95% of the floor plan is sold out. Thanks to all of you joining us this year in San Diego. On this slide, we'll review some dates and reminders of the upcoming show. Move-in starts on Wednesday of next week at 8 a.m. and ends at 5 p.m. All booths need to have carpeting, and if you do not have carpeting by 3 p.m. on Wednesday, it will be forced at the exhibitor's expense. Freeman will be laying carpet ordered through them, so if you plan to bring your own, please send me an email after this webinar. So we will not force carpeting at 3 p.m. on Wednesday if you let me know ahead of time. The show starts on Thursday, February 13th at 7:45 a.m. and closes on Thursday at 4 p.m. There you'll see the dedicated hours that day. The show continues on Friday, February 14th at 11 a.m. and closes on Friday at 2:30 p.m. Again, the dedicated hours for Friday are listed there. Exhibitor move out is Friday, February 14th at 2:30 p.m. when the show closes until 6 p.m. And some reminders for you all. Final booth payments are now due. If you are having trouble locating an invoice or have questions about payment, please send me an email. Service kits through Freeman are available online. This is where you can order furniture or carpeting, also order forms for electrical, internet, and other items should you need them. And as I mentioned, with exhibitor move-in, you are required to have some type of flooring covering your booth floor. You may rent carpeting through Freeman or bring your own. If you are bringing your own, please let us know. On this slide, you will see our floor plan. The entrance is at the bottom of the slide. And then the school security and safety pavilion is in the bottom left, where those round tables are down the aisle. Then you will also see the Knowledge Exchange Theater, which is booth 337, the AASA Social Media Lounge, which is booth 429, and then backpack stuffing, which will take place on Friday, will happen in booth 247 in the back of the hall. Note the Exhibitor Lounge is in the back left of the hall. This is where space selection will take place on Thursday and Friday, and where you can find AASA staff. When we're not walking around on the show floor, we will be located there to answer any questions you may have. The Freeman service desk has been moved to the lobby of the exhibit hall. So that's where you can locate Freeman with any questions about shipment or orders you placed for your booth. And then on the right side of the hall is School of the Future, booth 727. This is where the 20-minute presentations will take place on Thursday and Friday, so please stop by. And now I'm going to hand it over to Catherine.
Thanks, Lauren. So before we turn it over to our special guest, I wanted to give everybody an update on how AASA is working to increase floor traffic at the show in San Diego. So this year we'll have 2 coffee breaks in the hall as well as a snack break in the hall to help drive that traffic. As Lauren mentioned, we also have the School of the Future and the Knowledge Exchange Theater on the floor as well, which are always great traffic drivers. And then we are also, for the 3rd year in a row, doing our backpack stuffing, which you are welcome to join. Superintendents and exhibitors are encouraged to come on Friday from 11 to noon to help stuff backpacks for a local school that will then be donated. AASA has also been increasing the attendee awareness of the NCE Marketplace, or our exhibit hall, before the conference. So new this year, we have a searchable program book that's mobile friendly so that any attendee can actually search for exhibitors through the app. And then they've also been marketing the Knowledge Exchange Theater using dedicated emails, and then also adding dedicated emails to attendees specifically about coming to the NCE Marketplace in the last several months to help drive that. And then we just wanted to remind you guys, as the last the last week before the show, you guys do have access to the NCE Marketplace Exhibitor Toolkit. So it's an online kit where you can download logos, web banners. It shows you examples of social media posts or sample email that you could use. It's all already formatted for you. You just would need to plug in your company name and your booth number. So make sure that you check that out. It's on our website. It's under exhibiting, but if you can't find it, just let Lauren or I know, and we'll help point you in the right direction. It's a really great tool to help get the word out to potential attendees where you're going to be and to remind them to come stop by your booth. So with that, I will now turn it over to our guest star, Mort Sherman. As Lauren mentioned, he is the AASA Associate Executive Director of Leadership Services, and he's also a former superintendent. So Mort, take it away. You might be on mute, Mort.
Let me see.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I was just sharing some thoughts about how this national conference is so important to all of our district leaders and to folks who are committed to serving America's children. And so thank you for your support of the work that we're doing. And we often speak about your work as being our partners. And it's kind of a thread and a theme I want to establish as we go through the next couple of slides. We know what we know as superintendent, and we also have a pretty good handle on what we don't know. And so we can't be experts on everything. So when we look out across that huge exhibit hall, we're hoping that we could find folks to help expand our knowledge, to serve our kids, to expand what we're doing on their behalf. And so I look, and I think I speak for the thousands of other superintendents who will be there, I look at this as a great learning opportunity, a moment where we're not pressed with board meetings or the buses are running late or a PTA meeting is concerned about test scores. But this is an opportunity for professional learning with colleagues, not just superintendent colleagues, but business colleagues. So it's that belief system, that way in which I think most come to this meeting. Now, there are a few who are coming just because it's San Diego, and I can't imagine that anybody I know would be in that category, but I bet you there's one or two. They might not make it to the floor, but for all the others, there is a clear and important reason for being there. I just, a word about my background, just so you know, I was a superintendent for 25 years in a number of states, including Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and even here in Virginia as a superintendent in Alexandria. And regardless of whether it was an urban district or a little bit larger or smaller, the core reason for going there is networking, for learning together. So you're an important part of that. When you look at the superintendents, this is not just a chance for you to meet the superintendents from across the country, but also for us to do that. This idea that we see annual budget spending of over $602 billion ranges pretty dramatically. To give you a little bit more specific information about that, about 50 to 60% of our members are from smaller districts, rural and others. And yet at that district, I'm going to be meeting with Richard Carranza, the superintendent, chancellor in New York City, with Jesus Jara, the superintendent in Clark County, the 5th largest district in the country. So you'll get on that floor and in the meeting halls and opportunities to talk with superintendents from the very smallest to the districts that already have $3-4 billion budgets, 25 to 35,000 staff members. And most of us do see ourselves as CEOs. However, within that, there's a difference from the business model of CEOs. We see our support of children as a core mission. And through that, we are always seeking to be learners and to be instructional leaders as part of that. When the concept here about purchases being made in bulk, it's really interesting depending upon the size of the district. And most of you might know this, and I'll be glad to talk about it. And we have a chance for questions and answers later. But a lot of decisions are made at the school level, but approved at the district level. And the reason is that whole issue of proximity close to the instructional level or operational level. Larger purchases, whether it's buses or others, that's certainly done at the district level. So there's a tension between the two. So next slide, please. Am I advancing the slides? I don't think so.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
There you go. Thank you. So this issue of 58% of the paid conferences are superintendents, that's consistent with history for us, that there are others who come as part of a team, and often see board members working directly with superintendents and with their deputy superintendents or other cabinet members who are walking the halls. And sometimes they break out because there's so many exhibits going there. They say, hey, you take transportation, you take textbooks. Sometimes there's a strategic plan to how you go across that area. I go across the exhibit hall, and it's really interesting with the 21 years of experience. And so there's a note later that like always ask where they're from, how large your district is. But if you could be subtle about it, you might also want to ask, how long have you been in your district? What other districts have you been ahead of, or leader, or superintendent in? This idea of 21 years of experience. I know after 25 years, I was very different about how I approached that exhibit floor than when I first went to the AASA exhibits back in the 80s, when I used to go and try to hit every single place, every single hall or every single booth. That's not what a lot of the superintendents do. They are strategic about what exhibits and what partners they visit with. Next, please. So this one about send your best people is tied down to this note about being engaging and actively working. And I think I probably should have added or asked to add one more piece there, which is the whole reason you're there, and goes back to my opening comments, is the question about being engaging and actively working and knowing what you're talking about. You might get a minute or two to catch a superintendent's ear or a board member's ear or another district leader's ear, but in that time, not only be nice and be, all the things that I'm sure all of you are, but also have some way of getting a hook, of knowing that this is an important issue across the country, whether it's school safety or where the reading wars that are going on or the math wars that are going on. All that is a way to catch a superintendent's ear really quickly, that you know what the issues are facing all of us as superintendents. And this is the item that I mentioned earlier. The second bullet on this page is about the district size, knowing that you got to know the territory. And so they want to talk also about their district. They want to be able, if you can get them engaged in a conversation, and tell you about the number of kids. But expand that. I would suggest make sure you know, does that include 1,000 teachers, 10,000 teachers? And what about numbers of schools or principals that you have? And then this other question is, how are decisions made? Are they made at the school level or the district level? And what's the role of the superintendent or the board? And that varies, again, as this last sentence does in the second bullet, is the size of the district will be different. In the smaller districts, in the rural and small districts, the superintendent might be The procurement office might be the purchasing agent. And in other size districts, they'll have a cabinet making those decisions a very different way than smaller districts. So this issue of district size is really important so that you get an ear about the decision-making pattern. So some deals are made in the exhibit hall floor. You know, that's an interesting line that I decided to keep in this slide. When I first became a superintendent in 1988, I think this was more true than it is today. Most superintendents are very cautious about committing to something or acknowledging that they could make that sort of decision without going through a process. So you might add, is there a purchasing policy or a procedure that you should know about, not just who it is, but what is in fact the board approved policy that connects to that budget that we mentioned earlier when it's over $600 million. This idea of the strategic follow-up, I'm going to suggest to you, if you've not already done it, yeah, you know, we all have business cards and that's very nice. Most of us are using a simple way of getting information on the when I deal with 35 different programs and over 2,000 superintendents involved with our cohorts and our professional learning, I'm trying to use a QR approach where you could just use a QR code of some kind, get all the information that you need, whether it's that or some other way, or you know, gathering information, putting a sheet down and signing in some way. But make it as simple and as direct as possible. It's a good time also for a good conversation, you know, that active and engaged piece from the earlier slide. The strategic follow-up starts, as you know better than I do, at that very moment when you meet the person. So whether it's getting a name, finding out who to process the information to, or so on. And with this is kind of a caution. You know, I remember year after year going to conferences, and before I packed my suitcase to go home, going through that bag that I got on the exhibit floor, or going to the different work sessions and learning sessions, and making a decision what went back with me on the plane. And not a lot made it back on the plane. Sometimes a quick bit of information, a single sheet, a really important brochure or flyer or a folder. But a lot of the times it was simple. Like how do I get this information back to somebody in my office? And I mean, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking the last couple of years, I used to take pictures of the stuff I took off the exhibit floor, you know, my cell phone, and send it back and say, beware, you know, get ready, because I really want you to talk to this person. So if there's a way through technology or some other way of getting a connection back to the district, I would suggest that as well. So this idea, the effectively convey what could be done for them. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle. And when he talks about the business models to why some businesses succeed or school systems succeed, it's about the question of why. You know, the how and the what follow when he calls this Golden Circle. But this idea of like, what can you do? Reduce my healthcare costs? Well, you got my ear. Is it through self-funding, or can you help me improve my transportation? Are you looking at self-driving vehicles, the way some of the districts are beginning to think about it, or whatever the topic may be? It has to be a quick catch, an important catch, knowing that this is an important issue for superintendents. And I do believe in the Simon Sinek piece and the imperative of always catching the why. This is important for you, and I'd like to talk to you about it because of this, and whatever the this may be. And the other piece that I have a note here from Gail Platnick, who was an ASA superintendent, that was our ASA president 2 years ago. I sent out this slide deck to all of the past presidents just to get some information, and out of respect for the wonderful support you give us. And her answer to me, I thought was really interesting. She said, you know, anything you could do is to give them an opportunity to get their hands on, to look at, touch, feel, think about the product, whatever it might be. You know, that tactile catch is really important. So it's not just the cerebral or an academic one, but you get in there and connect to people on a learning basis, which is really immediate, is important. The signage, you're the experts on that. We have a wonderful history of that, but this idea of seeing it from a distance in the hall, when I walk up and down those exhibit lanes, what catches my eye, besides a pen that I might use or a bowl of candy, I mean, that's all nice, but a signage, I really believe, it almost sounds like obvious, but if there's a way to take this idea of the signage connected to that a bullet above, what's the message that is conveyed? Not just that it's Mort Sherman's learning company, but I can help you improve your reading scores by 3rd grade. Boom, I got it. I'm going to go over that. I will be jumped pretty quickly to an issue that we're all facing as district leaders. And finally, this question, I think, is this one mine as well?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Okay. This is what I was saying about be sure to know what's going on in public education. There's lots of ways to do that, whether it's going to Education Week and just reading some back editions, or reading our school administrator, our award-winning journal that comes out monthly from AASA, or reading Phi Delta Kappa, or the National Association of Elementary Schools, or NACE, the early child, or the secondary school principals, or the school boards. They all have publications. They all have daily and weekly tags that you can get a hold of and do a quick read on what's going on in public education. For some, it's how to pay attention to Carl Perkins and the ESSA law. For others, it might be something else, but there are threads happening across the country. And I'm going to be more reacting in a positive way to somebody who has some idea about what's going on in my professional life, because and I know that because you took the time and you say, oh, I just read about. Well, that's going to catch my ear. It makes me know that you do want to be connected to my work as a superintendent, to what I do back in the districts, and this idea is what keeps the superintendent up at night, besides ajna, heartburn, GERD, buses that don't run on time. We really do care deeply about the safety of kids, and so there's a whole lot of information about that, about student achievement, about students moving around in districts, about the increasing level of poverty, and I mean, all of those are really tough issues, but it's not universal. What Richard Carranza might be dealing with in New York City might be different than Jeff Dillon's dealing with in Wilder, Idaho, with 1,000 kids. So that idea way back in the beginning where we said, what size is your district, was not just a throwaway line, but it goes directly to what keeps the superintendent up at night. And then what's the why? How can you help address those issues? And it's listed here to learn more about issues facing superintendents. This is a great website, the Education Commission of the States. You're going to get some really good handles very quickly on what we're doing. This is a little bit older. This one that's listed here, the last bullet, the 2012 November issue. There are online all of our recent issues of the school administrator, and each of those deal with really important content areas that we face. Do I have another slide?
No, that's it.
That's it.
Yes.
I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Mort. We really appreciate your insight, and that perspective will be very helpful. So as we wrap up, I want to remind everyone to send any questions you may have to myself or Catherine. Our email addresses are listed below. I can be contacted at lmiller@smithbuckland.com. We're happy to answer any questions you have regarding the show that is coming up next week. And we will see everyone in San Diego. And then we're going to wrap up with a Q&A. Please use the chat function to submit any questions you may have regarding the show or for Mort regarding what he presented and his unique experience as a superintendent. The chat function can be found in the bottom of your screen. He received one question. Who is the decision maker at school districts for health benefits?
Boy, let me divide that into a couple parts for you. I was a superintendent in a state where we had negotiations with our teacher unions, New Jersey, New York. I was a superintendent in Virginia, where we have right to work, kind of controlling it. And the reason I start the answer to this question is that sometimes the decision making starts with those negotiations right at the table. What goes into any number of those areas with health insurance, how much a share, what kind of percentage. Ultimately, contracts such as health are agreed to by the board. They go through the superintendent. But the detail work is usually with the business administrator, the COO, or something at that kind of district level. It's not at the school level. Getting involved directly with the superintendent is probably a good step. And although I separate that from the decision makers, superintendents know a good part of our budgets are dealing with health benefits, and if there's a way to provide that wonderful service that employees need at the same time controlling that how much we're spending on it, that push me, pull me in balance, goes to the superintendent. So it's the negotiations, it's the board, it's the superintendent, the COO, business administrator, and those sorts of folks. And sometimes it's done through an RFP process. Watch the papers and watch what's coming out of different size districts that you might have as a target area.
Thank you, Mort. We received a couple more questions. How do superintendents plan their exhibit hall visit before arrival? And what's your biggest headache in working with all the superintendents?
Well, the first question, let's see, do we plan the exhibit hall? Sometimes. I think our conference folks here who are just wonderful have done a great job of trying to pull people in, whether it's our knowledge exchange theater, and we have several programs going on in there. But I don't know any superintendent who skips the exhibit hall entirely. And I think there are two general answers to that once you get them in there. I think there are topics of specific interest to superintendents. So they might be looking for a math textbook. They might be looking for something dealing with safety or security or internet security. I just got off the phone about an hour ago with the superintendent in Illinois who's going through a major hacking in his system. So they will come based upon those topics that we talked about earlier in the slides, and some of them with specific ideas of things they want to find out about. And others are much less strategic. So let me go walking up and down, and you'll see them walking up and down the aisles and looking left to right and thinking, what might catch the eye and be worth a follow-up? And that goes way back to the beginning. If a superintendent is doing that, I like that kind of approach because in many ways they're looking to learn. They said, oh my gosh, I never thought about that question of AI and how it relates to visiting the Smithsonian Museum through history classes in the future. Let me go stop over there and take a look at that. And then the second question, could you repeat it? I don't see it up on the screen anymore.
What's your biggest headache in working with all these superintendents?
My biggest headache, well, I can only speak from my position, is how to support them be effective and successful. And I don't know that's what you're asking, but I wonder if that's the biggest headache I recognize that they're dealing with, or that I understand, but let me connect them, is their longevity. Superintendents generally are still serving for all kinds of reasons, only between 3 and 3.5 years. That kind of lack of continuity in a district has a great impact upon the health of the district's student learning. I think the Dean of Superintendents is Dennis Peterson up in Minnetonka. And I think he's at over 45 years as a superintendent. So for me, where I sit in creating programs, it's not so much the content as it is being an effective person in how you deal with your teachers, how you deal with your community, how you approach your students, your staff. It's that level of human interaction and getting results that's going to sustain you in your position.
Thank you, Mort. We have a couple more questions that recently came in. The first is, what is the actual role of superintendents in purchase decision process, final approvals after their team have done research?
Well, if you look at most board agendas, you can get a handle on something which is unique to the superintendency, but it's not in every single state. The law is generally their school boards hire, you probably know this, hire one employee, and that's the superintendent. And the superintendent is directly responsible, and usually that pipeline that the school board has one employee also controls the setting of the agenda. So the agenda, as recommended by the superintendent, it is rare, unless there's a lot of friction going on in that school district, that agendas get to the board or decision making about purchase get anywhere at a major level without the superintendent signing off. So the role of the superintendent, maybe not to dig so deeply, but certainly to be the set of eyes for the board, for the community, and to be that final decision maker. And that doesn't vary much, whether it's at a huge district or a small district. We kind of look at ourselves as that last catch on what might serve the kids best before it gets out there publicly.
Piggybacking off of that decision-making question, someone asked, who is the decision maker at school districts regarding SEL?
Well, let me give a plug, first of all, if you don't know that the AASA has a major initiative going on with social emotional learning. We have about 75 school districts involved with our cohort. And boy, that's happening all over the place. That decision maker, I just want to be really candid. Right now, a lot of the decisions are made by teachers in the classroom, just the way in which they interact with kids, with one another, with the principal, with the parents, and the community in general. And for us, that's a key line of SEL is what happens with it at the teacher level. The principal is certainly engaged with setting a school climate, a school environment. But I am seeing actually districts create SEL coordinators, SEL committees, SEL board goals to look deeply at what's happening with social and emotional learning in the school district. So it varies across the district, not necessarily but by size, but more by commitment, by setting of goals. And it's going to emerge. And by the way, our theme for the conference next year in New Orleans for February 21 is social and emotional learning.
Awesome, thank you, Mort. We have two questions related to technology. The first question is, how closely do superintendents work with personnel in charge of security, communication, equipment, or IT?
Again, depending upon the size of the district, it could vary. I think at this point, more and more superintendents are recognizing the need to get very deeply involved as a leader, setting the tone, setting the direction, staying on top of the strategic plan, and monitoring results, whether it's back to SEL or going to any area that we might have mentioned today, is this issue of monitoring results or reporting out in a dashboard format or whatever the district might use. But in some way, being engaged to the level of knowing what's going on, but not necessarily. I'll give you an analogy. My father was an auto mechanic, never graduated high school, and could smell a car and make it, fix it somehow just by giving it a touch here. And probably before some of you were even born, knew how to plug and point a condenser and fix the carburetor. I, on the other hand, I'm a pretty good driver. I never had to dig down to adjust the points, plugs, and condensers. And I kind of look at technology in the same way. I'm a user, and so superintendents often see themselves, whether it's for safety or others, as the broad policy and strategic planning setter, and not necessarily getting in there and fine-tuning and digging too deeply into the sorts of details.
And the second technology question is, do superintendents recommend technology they feel is important for their students, for their teams to investigate? Or in other words, in addition to signing off on final purchases, do they sometimes start the investigations?
They do sometimes start it. That's a really insightful question. Many of us, related to that, though it's not in your language, is the whole question of one-to-one technology. And often a superintendent would go to a conference like this and say, you know what, we should be thinking about this, whatever this is. In this case, to be technology, use of technology, artificial intelligence, or whatever is coming down the pike that's impacting how kids learn, access, hotspots, whatever it is. And so that I think most superintendents would see themselves as the leader who would raise the questions, and the vehicle for raising those questions could be with a cabinet or a community group or chamber of commerce. But the superintendents, I think, who are most successful push really hard on bringing those issues to the district and finding a way of raising it within the unique climate and culture of a district.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mort. I don't see any other questions, so we're going to wrap up with that one. Oh, we have one more. We'll end with this question. What are the challenges that keep these new ideas from being implemented?
Did I see a name pop up there? Morgan, was that right?
Yes.
Well, Morgan, when you and I write a book together to answer that question, I think we will have solved lots of issues. And I don't mean to be glib, but you know, it's fascinating to me. I'm going to give you 3 quick answers. One starts with a story. A guy named Marshall McLuhan, who's a psychologist from the 60s from the University of Toronto, says, you know, the problem with most of us in life, particularly with educators, is that we go down the highway at 65 miles an hour and look at our rearview mirror. And when we look at our rearview mirror, what we see is a Conestoga wagon rather than seeing the future. And so the first answer is this whole issue of how we vision, how we sense the future, rather than just being so bound by that Conestoga wagon. The second is another book. If you really want to understand our profession, it's not reading just today, but there's a wonderful book called School Teacher, written in 1976 by a person called Dan Lortie, Lortie. And he said in his sociological study, says, you know, most teachers are conservators, not conservative, and conservators, that they believe that they want to protect their kids and they want to be treated fairly, paid a fair wage, and be left alone. And others have written, you know, when they go into classrooms, you can't sometimes tell what decade it's in. So this idea of looking through the rearview mirror, my first answer. The second one, in terms of they are conservators, leads to the third. If you could inspire teachers, and this is not keeping away in a deficit model, but an asset way, if you can inspire teachers and principals, that's where superintendents are going to not be kept up at night, except in happiness, and saying, you know, through our principals and superintendents and teachers, excuse me, I'm finding a way to move this district ahead. If you're having trouble convincing those teachers, you're not going to do well. Let me give you a most recent example. If you read the research coming out of New York City with the new approach to building the community into the school district, you'll see some results coming out which are really interesting, different from models that existed 5, 10, 15 years ago. Says, let's close schools, let's be tough, let's hold them accountable. And what this new administration at Richard Carranza and others are doing in New York is said, let's figure out how to address the issues by supporting the community, supporting the teachers to connect with the community, because that's where the families are. And I bet you will see a difference in school achievement, school discipline, school attendance, and the results are coming out. It's an asset model rather than solving a problem. Anybody else want to take one of my graduate courses in education leadership?
Morgan says thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Great question. Any others?
There's no other questions. We'll wrap up here, but feel free if you think of a question later on today or in the week for myself Catherine, or for Mort, feel free to email me and we will get it over to him or get you an answer as soon as possible. Again, thank you so much for joining us in San Diego next week, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
See you all in California. Thank you.
Thanks, Mort.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.